Good evening, everybody, and welcome to what's now week 35 of the Small Worm Bin weekly-ish update. Today we're going to be splitting the daughter bins, so the mother bin is going to become a grandmother. I've set the bins up yesterday, and what they consist of is, you can see some strawberry leaves there, some London plain leaves, which I swept up off the street, wet cardboard, the green is eggshell carton, and some horse manure. And it's all been wetted down and left to sit for 24 hours. There's a little nugget from one of the horses. That's been well aged, by the way, as well. So if you're going to add horse manure to your worm bin, make sure it's well aged. So I've essentially done the same thing in both bins. Again, in this bin it's just wetted down cardboard, egg carton, bits of straw, leaves, and another little pony nugget. So that's it. I've got them set up now, and we'll have a look at the worm bins, see how they're doing, and get the worms moved into their new home. This is the second daughter bin, which was split off in week 20, I believe it was, so it's 15 weeks old. And the thing to notice here is all along the side of the bin, lots and lots of castings. So that tells me there's been a bit of a mass bailout of this bin, and it isn't surprising really, because these bins have been pretty much neglected for the last 6 weeks or so. In anticipation of not being around very much, I added a lot of melon skin and fruit scraps to all of the bins, and because I wasn't around then, I wasn't able to manage them, and as you can see, they're far too wet now. So I'm just going to take out a couple of handfuls of worms where I can find them and add them to one of the new bins that we've set up. And because it's not too bad, it's not as wet as some of the bins have been in the past, I'm just going to stop talking for a minute and you can hear how squelchy the bin is. It's really just like mud. But anyhow, it's not as bad as the bins have been in the past, so I'm just going to add some dry brown cardboard to this bin, and that should sort it out. The numbers have obviously declined because there's been obviously quite a few escapees, but I'm still going to go ahead and split the bin anyhow. Adding the cardboard to it will help dry it out, and then any cocoons in there should hatch once I've got regular food going back into the bin now. You can see it's stuck to my fingers like mud really. So that's the second daughter bin. Now a mother herself. And here we have the first daughter bin, which was split off in week 11. And once again, if you look at the sides of the bin, it's quite obvious the worms were not happy at being neglected for so long, and there's been a bit of a bailout of this bin as well. Now you can see some food there. This is some food I added yesterday. It was the same with the other bin. So where I can find a couple of handfuls of worms, I'm just going to remove them and add them to one of the new bins that we've set up. There seems to be more in this bin, which is good news. In other words, less seem to have bailed. But again, if you look back at previous videos, I think, you know, there should be more worms in the bin than there are. So obviously, when the food which I added and then left because I was away quite a lot, it made the bin too wet for them, which they won't have liked. And then once the food ran out, they just decided to vote with their legs and go elsewhere. So that's one of the things about established worm bins. Once you get your worm bin established, you need to pretty much keep to a regular routine, because what worms don't like is a sudden and dramatic change within the environment. So where these have been fed, you know, smallish amounts quite regularly, 1.5 kilos, 2 kilos of food every week, they got dumped a load of food because I knew I wasn't going to be around. Now it does show, because I've still got worms, that you can do this. I mean, you won't lose your entire worm population if you need to go away. And bear in mind, 6 weeks is quite a long time to leave the bins completely neglected, considering the amount of attention they got prior to me having to be away. So, you know, they will cope, I suppose is what I'm trying to say, but there'll be losses. And like I was saying, the worm bins don't like worms, you know, within worm bins. Now there's a little pot worm. Again, if you remember from earlier videos, a good sign that the bin is starting to turn, and I suspect that's just because there was far too much fruit scraps added in one go, and they made the bin too wet and probably slightly changed the acidity. Now there's only a couple of potworms in there, so that's nothing to worry about. But if you see a lot of potworms, they prefer a much more acidic environment to your normal composting worms. So it means that, I mean, they'll get on fine together in the bin, they just compete for the same food resources. But if your bin is overrun with the white, small, thinner potworms, your bin is too acidic and your composting worms will not be happy. So, yeah, I can understand how this went wrong. I added far too much food in one go. The worms were not happy. And of course, once they'd processed it, they left. Ingrates that they are. So, that's the first daughter bin, and as you can see, I've removed a couple of handfuls of worms from there. And again, I'm going to do exactly the same with this bin, and that's to add quite a bit of dry, plain brown cardboard to help dry it out. And now that we've got rid of some of the worms, there's a bit more room for the other guys to grow and for the cocoons to hatch. So here's the dry cardboard that I'm adding, and as you can see, it's just roughly torn up dry brown cardboard, and all I'm going to do is turn it into the bedding. Now as you can see, I'm not doing a great job here one-handed. I'll do a better job off camera, but it's just to give you an idea. This is all I do. Once the bin is not, it's too wet, but it's not unsalvageable, in which case I'd have to harvest the worms, which I had to do in one of the earlier videos. I just simply tear up some rough cuts of dry brown cardboard and mix that in with the vermicompost. It will help absorb some of the moisture, and of course the worms use it as bedding and they'll eat it. You can see from my hands there just how wet it is. It's just sticking to my fingers like mud. So that's really all I do to correct bins like this when they're wet but not unsalvageable, as I say. Okay, let's get on now and have a look at the mother bin. And here she is, the mother bin, the bin that launched 1,000 worm bins. So you can see from the sides there hasn't been as much of a bailout from this bin, but looking at the vermicompost, it's similar to the other bins, it's still incredibly wet. Too wet, so again I'll just add some roughly torn up dry brown cardboard to this. But you can see the worms are doing okay in the mother bin. They're working away top to bottom and they're spread right throughout the bin, which is good. Again, with the food, you can see is the stuff I added, I threw in yesterday without properly looking at the bins. And again, this bin suffers from what the other two bins suffered from, which was a glut of fruit scraps, which they obviously all ate, and then a portion of them will have decided to bail. and again you can see from the scrapings there, it looks just like mud, so far too wet. So I'll correct that, but I won't do anything else with the mother bin. There's plenty of food in there for them to work away for the next week, and then I'll have a look at it next week and see how we get on. That's it. That's your update for week 35. I'll try and get an update next week or the week after and see how mother, daughters and granddaughters are doing. Just to let you all know, I'm slowly catching up on all of your videos. You are a productive lot, I've got to say. I've come back to thousands of videos to catch up on. So that's how I'm spending my evenings. I'll catch you all soon for another update. Bye for now.